Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar tonight. So I'm Deidre. I'm the CISO for the Western Cape Government. And I will be hosting the session. So we have Kerissa in the room. I'm sure she needs no introduction. I personally know Kerissa for, I think, 10 years. Kerissa, I think 2014 is when we met, so more or less 10 years. Welcome and so lovely to be your host, Kerissa. So we will be speaking about women, just the successes. We take to do a bit of a reflection and look back and look at the successes that we have as women have in the workplace. So I was looking at our current the census of 2022, and what they say is actually we have 48.5% males and we have 51.5% women in South Africa. So that total, of course, not merely reflect what we see in the workplace. And I mean, that already made me thinking. So definitely tonight, this, I think, is a topic that's very relevant. Most of us here in the room, are women. We know the challenges that we face, but we also, Chris is going to share some of her insights in terms of the successes that we came a long way and the successes that we have in the workplace. So I'm going to allow Kerissa to introduce herself now, and then Kerissa, all over to you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deidre. Thank you so much to the IC Squared chapter for having me on today. And thank you to all of you for making time late in the evening. I know this takes you away from your families and away from personal commitments. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm Kerissa Varma. I head up cybersecurity for Vodacom. So that's across Africa. And also my second job is I am president of Women in Cybersecurity Southern Africa. And that's really my passion project. And so when Deidre asked me to speak on Women's Month at the chapter event, I immediately said yes. I think we kind of figured out the date after I said yes, because I was so keen to do it. And I really wanted to have a conversation about how far we've come in 20 years. So I've been in cybersecurity for 20 years, and we're going to spend the next couple of minutes really doing a reflection back on how things were 20 years ago, how far we've come, but also how far we have to go. And I start all my talks with a story. So because I'm looking back 20 years, I thought I can't stop at 20 years. I got to look back all the way to when I was a child. And some of the sentiment that's really made me the leader that I am today. And I have to talk about my mom and start from there. My mom was a single mom, very driven, very passionate, and she pushed me really, really hard. So to give you an example, every morning I would sit down with a bowl of Pronutro before I went to school. And I hated Pronutro. There was nothing that I hated more than Pronutro. Like till today, if I see a bowl of Pronutro, I get squeamish because I hated it so much. But my mother was of the opinion that eating a good breakfast was really important to me. So she would ask me to eat half the Pronutro. She would say, Kerissa, eat half the Pronutro. And in my mind, somewhere I went, okay, well, half the Pronutro is not as bad as the whole bowl of Pronutro. So I would eat half the Pronutro. And then she would go, okay, well, there's only half a bowl left. Just eat the rest of it. And that's how she got me to eat breakfast every single morning. And fast forward 18 years later, I was 18 years old. I was on the way on my first flight, which was also my first international flight. I'd gotten a bursary to study in Malaysia. And that fear and that I know it's good for me, but I'm scared and I don't want to do it. And all of that came back. And I said to my mom, I don't want to go. I don't want to get on this plane. I don't want to go to Malaysia. I don't want to do this, this study technology for 4 years in a foreign land. I don't want to do it. And my mom said to me, well, just go for 1 month. Don't go for 4 years. Just go for 1 month. And if you don't like it, you can come back. And so 18 years later, she was still doing that to me. Just try it. Just one more. Just push yourself harder. Just a little bit more. And she still does it to me today. And so that's kind of my leadership philosophy. I can stand anything, whether it's the Pronutro, whether it's changing countries, whether it's pushing myself to do something that I've never done before, whether it is trying to, go head first into something that really scares me. I can withstand anything just for a little bit more. And so today we're talking about all the progress we've made over the last 20 years. The glass is half full. We're halfway there. But how do we go the rest of the journey? And what do we need to do to be able to go the rest of the journey? And what part do each of us play in that journey that we have to go forward on? So when I look back 20 years ago, I've got the first column sort of looks at 2004. And if you look back at technology in 2004, it was largely male dominated in South Africa. I mean, you may see one woman here and there, but it was predominantly male, and it was predominantly white male dominated. And so we come from this background where we have a very male centered view of what technology was 20 years ago. And Deidre mentioned that, we are more than 50% women in South Africa from the census, but we have only 20% of our workforce that is today female. Now, if you look at that, it's 20% more than we had 20 years ago. So that is already a massive step forward in the right direction. It is something to celebrate. We're not where we need to be, and we still have a lot of work left to do. But we've made a lot of progress. And I think we have to take a breath and celebrate that progress. Very often, when I started out my career, I would be the only woman at a conference. I would be the only woman at an event. I would be the only woman in a meeting. And that is happening less and less. I go to conferences today, there are a lot more women around me. So we have to celebrate those successes that we've had. We've made inroads, and they're important inroads. But there's a little bit of a challenge that comes with having a dynamic of having fewer females in the room than there are males in the room. And there's work for both men and women to do. And I want to share another story with you guys. So a few years ago, I was visiting another country. I was traveling with a male counterpart of mine, and we were talking to a CEO of the company. And every time I spoke, he would turn to my male counterpart and he would respond to my male counterpart. So I would ask him a question and he would turn away from me. He would turn to my male counterpart and he would speak to my male counterpart. And as the conversation progressed, I became more and more angry. I was actually getting irate. I was very, very frustrated. And I do this horrible thing. When I'm really angry, I cry, which is a horrible thing to do because you really don't want to cry when you're in such a position where you want to be powerful. And so I excused myself. I went to the bathroom, had a good cry. I came back and it was the lunch break. And lo and behold, we were sitting at a table and the only space available was next to the CEO that had basically ignored me for the entire meeting. And I'd sucked it up because I thought I need to get the decision made. I need to get the output of the meeting done. And I'm going to just suck it up and just move through it. And I sat next to him at lunch and I was very quiet. I was very reserved. And he turned to me and he said, Kerissa, why are you so quiet? You were very vocal. You were talking a lot in the meeting. We were just in. What happened? Are you tired? What's wrong with you? And I could have easily just said, look, I'm tired. I don't feel like talking. But I thought, no, at that point, I was going to have the conversation with him. And so I said, in the meeting we were just in, every time I spoke, you turned to my male counterpart and you responded to him. And I found it really disrespectful. And he was really taken aback. He was completely shocked. He said he didn't realize he was doing that. And he went quiet for a while. He went really pale. And he said, thank you for pointing that out. First of all, I didn't realize I was doing that. Secondly, in my culture, I don't speak directly to women. So in my mind, I was showing you respect. And in your mind, you were feeling disrespected. And what I learned in that conversation that day, that had I not sat next to him at lunch, had I not been brave enough to have the conversation, had I not been, sort of had my cry in the bathroom, come back and centered myself and done it from a place where I was calm, I probably would not have come out understanding his viewpoint. And there's always two perspectives to a story. And oftentimes when we find ourselves in a situation where we feel smaller because we are a woman, or we feel like we are being belittled, I'm really encouraging you. I'm not saying this is not going to happen, but I'm really encouraging you to have the conversation, to gather yourself, to take the time to gather yourself, but then to go back and have that conversation. I learned that day that even though I may see it as disrespect, I may see it as someone belittling me. It's not always the case because everyone has different perspectives. And so having that conversation is so important. And so if you think about that's the now, that's a situation we find ourselves in now. There's a few women, there's a lot of men. We're going to find ourselves in situations where we feel like we are not necessarily being given the time in a meeting, not necessarily being, allowed to speak. I really encourage you to call those areas out and not in a public forum, maybe take the person aside. I was lucky that I sat next to him during lunch and we could have a one-on-one conversation, but really address those issues. So where do we see ourselves going forward and what do we need to do going forward? I really think that corporate policy has to fundamentally change to support women. And I'm very blessed to work for an organization that I think is very forward looking with regards to this. And I'm going to talk about one specific policy at Vodacom. So Vodacom has a parenting policy that gives both men and women 4 months paid parental leave when a child is born. And I've been working in Vodacom for 3 years. And this policy has fundamentally changed how people view parenting in Vodacom. What I found in my team is I've had 2 people in my team, 2 men in my team, that have needed to take 4 months of leave when a child is born. Immediately it equalizes the playing field because it's not just the woman that's out of office for that 4-month period, it's the man as well. So you don't have a woman taking a big chunk away from her career to be able to support her family. It's both the dad and the mum that does it. So it's equalizing the playing field. The second thing that it's done, which is really amazing, is that it's caused the fathers to become part of the care system of their child. They're there waking up in the evening. They're there, doing the bottles and the feeding and all of that because they are there getting the same leave as the woman is getting. And that for me is a progressive corporate policy around gender equity. We've got a lot of corporate policy that looks at statistics. We want to get, 30% females into our teams. We want to get 40% of females into our teams. We want to get 50% into females into our teams. But we have to look deeper at corporate policy. We have to look at how corporate policy enables women to take up these roles. Because if we don't equalize the playing field, if we don't give people an equal starting point to be able to springboard into their careers, we're never fundamentally going to change a playing field. And so I do believe there's a lot of work that we have to do in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to be able to influence corporate policy, to be very equitable and to give women an even playing field to start off their journeys. The second sort of line talks about leadership and, thinking back to that all male, probably all white technology teams of 20 years ago, leadership back then was also very different. Leadership was directive. It was, it was very hierarchical. It was my manager tells me what to do and I execute it. And leadership has changed over time to become more collaborative, to be more, we expect our leaders to inspire us, to get us to a point where we want to work for them. And people say, people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad leaders. And so we really choose our leaders based on their leadership skills. But what that history of leadership, that, powerful, aggressive, directive leadership has given us, that very male-dominated technology that is the history we come from, our vocabulary is embedded in that. So if you think about cybersecurity and you think about the vocabulary we have, think about terms like kill chain, think about things like attack path, all very aggressive, all very, really, if you have someone coming into the field and they're faced with that, it's almost like whoa, I don't know if I want to be in the attack path. I don't know if I want to be part of, the kill chain or protect. It sounds very aggressive. It sounds very, severe. Whereas if we change the dialogue that we're having, if we're having dialogue around defenders, if we're having dialogue around protection, if we're having a dialogue around, empowering people to keep themselves safe, which is actually what our jobs are. That's what cybersecurity is all about. then our language is not as aggressive. Our language is not as, intimidating. And so we have this history, we have this language that has been built based on a very male-dominated view of the world. And over time, I think the way we have communicated with each other has led to a very aggressive view of cybersecurity, a very aggressive view of what cybersecurity is. And that may be off-putting.
Under one managing the federal institution themselves to ensure access to justice for all South Africans.
We just need
Perhaps just unmute again, Kerissa and Deidre. I muted everybody now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Grant. So this aggressive language is off-putting for a lot of women. And so we have to be very conscious about how we use language to make women feel included. Where do we go going forward? And I put a quote on there saying, behind every successful woman, there's a tribe, and there really is a tribe. And I think about my own journey, and I could not have done anything that I've done, achieved anything that I've achieved without my tribe. And my tribe is my family. It's, the people I work with. It's my mentors. It's my sponsors. It's everyone that supports me to be able to allow me to do the work that I do. But equally, even though I rely on that tribe so much, I know that for many women, being in cybersecurity is still a very lonely place. And so 3 years ago, I started Women in Cybersecurity Southern Africa. And we've grown exponentially. I mean, we were 5 women back then. We've got, probably more than 1,000 followers now on LinkedIn, or actually probably far more than 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. So we've really grown this amazing community of women that are really there to support each other. And so your tribe can come from anywhere. Your tribe doesn't have to come from your home. Your tribe doesn't have to come from your town. Your tribe doesn't have to come from your work, but you need a tribe. And and there are more opportunities today to build a tribe than there were 20 years ago. Organizations like Women in Cybersecurity didn't exist 20 years ago. So we have more platforms today to be able to pull together, to be able to work together, and we need to utilize these platforms as hugely powerful enablers of our career and of our own personal success, and then pay it back into those platforms to be able to support other women. When I was starting out in cybersecurity, there was no female CISO that I could look up to. There was no woman that I could say, 20 years ago, here's a female CISO, that's what I want to be. In my vocab back then, in my mind back then, there was no one that I could see myself as in 20 years. The women that are starting out their careers today, they have these role models. They have really amazing pen testers that are women. They have really amazing female leaders. They have really amazing women that are fantastic role models. But these role models have a duty to make it easier for the next generation to be able to take up the roles so that it's not as hard as when we went through what we went through. And the last line talks about open and closed doors. So if you think back 20 years ago, the doors were really closed for women. I don't think we were having many conversations about diversity. The workplace was like, again, largely male, largely white male. And so if you were a woman, you stuck out like a sore thumb. You were, very intimidated. You were very much, you felt very isolated and very alone. Step forward 20 years to 2024. And we've got amazing targets, both globally and in corporates for gender equality. Everyone's driving towards having more females in tech. And so the door really is open for women. The opportunities really are there for women to take them up. But we are still not getting women into these roles. And so I started thinking about, what do we need to do going forward? Because if the door's open, if the door is truly open, if we have corporates saying, I have a target of getting, up to 30% of women in my workforce as female, and I'm sitting at 20%, it means every single hire I have over the next few years, I'm going to have to look at a female target first. And so if we have corporates making these big, grand gestures, what's stopping women from taking up these roles? And I really started to think about mentorship and sponsorship. And the last sort of conversation I wanted to have today is, we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, and I've had both in my career. I've had really good mentors and I've had really good sponsors. But I wanted to lean on why a sponsor would actually sponsor someone. Now, if you think about a sponsor is someone that will speak your name when you're not in the room, that will put you forward when you don't even know that they're putting you forward. They will be your ally when you are not around, and they will give you opportunities that you don't even know exist. That's a difference between a sponsor and a mentor. A mentor is someone that will guide and, give you advice and all of those things. But a sponsor will actually advocate for you, advocate for the progression of your career. Now, when a sponsor advocates for you, what are they doing? They're putting their relationship capital behind you. So they have relationships with people in the organization, with people outside the organization, and in backing you, they're using their relationship capital to back you. So it's a big risk that they take, because they are using their name, their brand, their reputation to be able to sponsor someone else. And so you really have to do the hard work to be worthy of that nomination. You really have to do the hard work to be able to be the person that someone will sponsor. And the door is open, the opportunities are there. But as women, we have to put our hands up and we have to do the hard work. And the hard work is different in different scenarios. If you are looking at, I'll talk about when way back in my career when I started off in cybersecurity. I was configuring firewalls, and I was, cabling things and all of that stuff. And when we had to move equipment into the data center, or we had to put a new firewall into the data center, or we had to do something that was manual, I would put my hand up. I want to do it. Why? Because the connotation in the room was that, oh, the guys will move the equipment in. It's a trolley, so I can't move it. I'm not going to physically lift the firewall. It's too heavy, but I can push it. So, I would put my hand up and go, I'll do it. Why? Because the next time someone has to do it, the next time someone wants to say, who's really good at their job? I want them to say, well, actually, you know what? Kerissa's damn good at her job, because she not only can she configure the firewall, she put it into our data center. She put the cabling underground. She's done everything end to end. And that lets my sponsor know that I am ready to do whatever it takes to get to that next level, to get to that next job, to get to that next opportunity. So whatever your aspiration is, whatever job you're after, whatever your focus is, put in the hard work. Put up your hand, and don't shoot yourself in the foot by excluding yourself from things that could be an opportunity going forward, because you don't know where that person is that will sponsor your career, where they will come into contact with you, where they will see you, when they will say, oh my goodness, I saw this amazing thing from this woman and she's great. The next time you're thinking about doing that, use her. We have to show up. We have to do the hard work, and we have to be ready to take that next step. And the last thing I'll say with this, the parking spots are reserved. Put your hands up for it. Women are very hard on ourselves. We will, have 60%, 50% of what it takes to do the job, and we'll hold ourselves back because we don't have the other 40 or 50% of what it takes. I've never taken on a role where I knew 100% of what I needed to do. I always feel uncomfortable. Every single day I feel uncomfortable. And when I'm not feeling uncomfortable, I know it's time to move on because I've become complacent. And that's how you grow. So you always push for the role that you can only do about 50% of, because it means you're going to grow in the next 50%. Put yourself out there, put your hand up, do the hard work. The roles are there, the opportunities are there. It's there for us to take. So my aim was to spend about 20, 25 minutes talking, and then to really spend some time taking your questions, hearing your thoughts about what it was like 20 years ago and what you think we need to do going forward 20 years. So Deidre, that's my bit. I put the slide together, so if you want to do a takeaway out of this and you want to remember it afterwards, you've got a little bit of a memory jogger. Yeah, we'll open for questions then, Deidre.
Yes, sure. Okay, so we open for questions. I will just stop sharing if it's okay with you and get back to the actual meeting. Yeah, so if you can put your hands up, we'll then take questions or comments. Let's hear what, share some of your stories. That would also be great. Yeah, the floor is open.
Maybe not a question, but a comment from my side, Kerissa. Thank you for sharing the insights. I quite like your approach of wanting to understand and educate, because it's very easy to take a position and say, all things are bad, we are victims. But I think that perspective is quite refreshing and is necessary. And it aligns to what we previously discussed as well. It's quite important to try and educate, because sometimes people genuinely don't know any better. So thanks for sharing that insights.
Yeah. And I don't know better, right? So I'm also learning, and there's things that I'm not comfortable with and I make mistakes on every day. So the same way I would treat someone else, I would expect them to treat me, and everyone has blind spots. And so we're all learning. So I think that's the only, and I think also you become less defensive if you treat it as an opportunity where the person just doesn't know any better. Because I think we also become defensive if we think that someone has something out to get us. Like, oh, this person is completely against hiring women. You've already put it in your mind that you're going to be on your guard when you're around that person, and your attitude towards a person and the way you engage with the person will change, even though you're not 100% sure that the way the person is reacting is because you're female. It could be actually you've just stepped on their foot when you walked in the door and you didn't realize it, but you don't know why they're reacting the way. So I think just probing and understanding and treating every situation of one that the person can learn and you can learn is super important.
Perfect. Thank you. Cyber God?
Evening all. Yeah, Kerissa, thanks for the session. It was extremely informative to hear from a woman's perspective. Having been in the industry for so many years, I think a lot of us look past those type of things. I mean, like you say, you don't really notice on the small things. But my question is really around how has it changed in the last 20 years, and how are women being perceived in the cyber/tech space today? Has it improved? Has it become better? And what can we do to support that? From our perspective, say as males, to empower them to raise their hands and actually take the step. What can we do?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And a lot of men ask me, like, what can I do? Like, how can I make this better? Like, I want to. Like, it isn't a man versus woman thing. I think all of us are trying to solve this problem, right? So men are trying to solve this problem, women are trying to solve this problem, and we've made huge gains. So it's not a massive problem that we can't solve. It's something we are solving. And what I often say to people is, find the person in the room that is feeling maybe unheard or less than. And it can be a male or it can be a woman. But just find that person and give them an opportunity to speak. I think just the recognition is so important. I want to share one more story. So my first board meeting, I was super nervous. I was really, really nervous. I was going into this room, once again, largely a male dominated room. There was one other woman in the room, massive boardroom, very intimidating, my first board meeting. And the chair of the meeting, as I walked in, he said, "Kerissa, hi, come sit next to me." And that's all he said to me. He said, he called me by my name and he said, "Come sit next to me." And all of a sudden, I felt seen, I felt heard, and I felt wanted. And that changed my position in the room. Just that one gesture by him changed my position in the room, because all of a sudden I wasn't feeling like I'm going to sort of like slink in and sit in the corner and nobody's going to notice me until my time to speak comes, and then I'm going to quickly talk and get out of the room. I didn't feel like that anymore because the chair had called me and said, "Kerissa, come sit next to me." So I think just call out that one person in the room that's maybe feeling unseen or unheard or needs a little bit of a prop up. We've got amazing, amazing talent in South Africa, men and women, but sometimes they just need a little bit of a push or a little bit of a virtual arm around the shoulder to say, you're wanted here, you have a space here, and you're important in this conversation, and that makes all the difference.
Okay, we have Colin up next.
Great. Hi, Kerissa. Colin here from, I'm also ex-Vodacom, so we're ex-colleagues, and we've interacted a couple of times in the past. So great to see you on this platform. I guess a couple questions from my side, maybe the first one being, I guess a lot of people, including myself, we join initiatives to ensure that women are getting the right equity, and we know that equity is very different to equality, so it requires that additional effort. So just from your standpoint and from your view, how do you think we're performing? Just in general, from a corporate perspective, in general, from a culture perspective, how far along do you think we've come? And then a second question, I'm raising 3 little girls, and it's super important for me to expose them to as much as possible. And coupled with the fact that there's so much of tech all around us, how do I ensure that I'm exposing them to a good level of tech? So, for example, I know I've gotten 2 of them into coding and robotics. But just hearing you talk now as well, cybersecurity is super interesting as well. So what could we do at grassroots levels, from whether it's primary school or secondary school, just to ensure they're getting the right levels of exposure to all these different types of tech capabilities? But yeah, that's me.
Great questions, Colin. So I'm going to tackle the first one around how well are we doing. If you talk to any big corporate out there, they all have targets around how many women they want to hire. So from that perspective, I think it's very high up on the agenda. They all have programs that look at, getting more females into the pipeline. With their bursary students, they're looking at how can they encourage women to take up tech bursaries. So there is a very conscious effort to increase numbers of women. I think where we have not failing, but where we need more work to be done is exactly what you're talking about on the grassroots level. So we need to have more women that understand that technology is a good career for women. We need to have more women that understand that cybersecurity is a good career for women. And the only way we can do that is via role modeling. So for young girls to be able to see women having successful careers in technology, successful careers in cybersecurity. And so there's a big responsibility in the few of us that are, in cybersecurity to go and impart that knowledge on the next generation. And I think there's lots of programs that are out there doing it. Women in tech, women in cybersecurity, there's a lot of programs that do it. But there's just too few of us to be able to influence the entire enormity of females that we have in South Africa. And so we really need people to champion that message. Taking it back to your girls, I wish my 2 kids would want to go into cybersecurity. Their dad's a software engineer, and I'm in cyber, and neither of my kids want to touch a computer. So well done to you on getting the 2 to do robotics and coding. You're clearly doing better than I am. But it's such a great career for women. And like I said, I think there's such a huge demand for women in cyber at the moment. It's so niche. There's 3.5 million. Actually, I think we're up to 4 million vacant cybersecurity roles globally today, which means that we have far more job vacancies than we have people. Now, if you look at that dynamic and you have targets to increase the number of females in that, when we're already scrambling just to fill those roles, it's a huge area that women could do amazingly well in. So we have a lot of work to do at grassroots. I do a lot of talks at schools. I do a lot of talks at universities. I'm actually at UCT next week. So I am trying to get out there and to, engage with the youth. Unfortunately, the fact that we have a history where we were considerably male dominated means that, and the fact that we only have 20% of our workforce female today means that there's very few females to be role models compared to the masses that we need to influence. So we really do need for those role models to be very vocal, for those role models to be very available, to really be able to encourage the next generation into cyber. I was at an event a few months ago, and I was sitting next to a little girl. Actually, it was a few years ago. And she was so excited. She was like, I want to start my career in cyber. Super excited. She's really bright. She gets great grades at school. And we were sitting and we were talking, and she was like, and then suddenly her face drops. And I asked her, what's wrong? Why the sad face? And she says, well, my teacher said I could do cybersecurity. My school's like super supportive. My parents don't know what it is, but they say go do it. Like go do cyber. It sounds like something that you could get a job in. But when I walk outside my house, when I go into my community tells me that tech is not something a girl should do. You should get married, you should have children. And so we still have that stigma as well that we're dealing with. And so we still have a long, long road to go. But I think conversations like this, dads like you that are getting your kids into coding, that are encouraging your girls into cybersecurity, it's exactly what we need. We need every parent to do that.
Yeah. Maybe I just want to add to that quickly, Colin, because I was thinking of just my daughter. So COVID hit, we worked from home, and of course we were working from we have an open area here, so we were sitting there and working and having meetings and so on. And by the time she started studying, she was like, oh mom, she learned all about governance today because she hear us speaking about governance all the time and cybersecurity. So because we were like, open about it, and we spoke even at the table at our, when we have our dinners and stuff, we speak about, how the day was and things like that. And that is also how they catch on. So I think we must also be, kind of, if we want our girls to go into cybersecurity and make IT a fun thing, be mindful in terms of what you are saying and how you're addressing the issues. So issues there will be, but I mean, without you knowing, kids are actually listening at you, and and hopefully, they must take the good out of it, and we shouldn't be, kind of making it a drag, although sometimes it, it becomes difficult at times. So that is just, I just wanted to add to that. Okay, next we have Fasi.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Deidre. Salam, Kerissa. Thank you for the inspiring talk. I think, firstly, your reputation certainly does precede you. And I think for myself, I think I've seen lots. I was fortunate enough, obviously, to have quite a few female, I'm going to say, leaders in my career. Some in cyber, some in architecture, etc. And I think for me, just outside of cyber, Kerissa, what advice would you have to young ladies when it comes to confidence within a corporate environment? Because I find a lot of individuals, especially females, I don't think they feel confident enough to have the right conversations with the right people. And having mentored quite a few females and currently taken in some female interns, I do it beyond the fact that it looks good from an equity perspective, because I think a lot of it's driven at the moment from a corporate side based on equity, because an African black female carries more weight. And I think that's the wrong way of doing it, because I think it's being done for the wrong reasons. But I think for the younger generation coming in, whether male or female, their mindset's a lot different in terms of the approach of equality and merit, etc. So I just want to, what's your thoughts on that, and then what advice you have for young females that I can maybe then relay to them in terms of confidence.
I think that's a great point. And so when I said earlier that the door is open, corporates are sort of chasing these targets to get more women in. I can also very clearly say that no corporate will hire a woman that can't do the job. And so I think I start my conversation with every woman that has made it through that door, that has landed that position, telling them you've actually beat out thousands of people to get this job, which means that you're very, very capable. And so you can do this job. You were meant to be in this role, and you've got the caliber to actually be doing the job. I think that I've had both. I mean, I've taken on graduates almost every year for like the last, I don't know how many years. But I've seen it with both men and women. When they start their careers out, they're very nervous. I think they've learned a lot of stuff that makes them book smart, but sometimes the real world doesn't always lining up the way, your books taught you things would line up. And so they feel very intimidated. And I was chatting to a girl in my team a few years ago, and she was saying to me, what she does is she would sit in all of these meetings and she wouldn't say anything. And I asked her, so why are you actually not saying anything? Because you're really smart and you've got the knowledge, and 2 days later you come back and you tell me, oh, but this is actually how it should be done. Why didn't you actually say it in the meeting? Why didn't you actually air that view? Are you feeling uncomfortable? What's going on? And she said to me, well, Kerissa, you know what? When I'm in that meeting, I'm making notes furiously of all the acronyms that you guys are talking about, because it's like another language. I don't understand what you're saying. It's a whole lot of acronyms about things that are specific. Half of them are specific to the company, which even when I Google, I can't find. And then half of them are actually part of the industry lingo, which is just, evolved over time. And so it's not necessarily something that I'm used to talking about or being in the mode to be able to just collaborate on. So I go away and I research it and I try and figure out what the acronym is. And then I say, oh, well, that's what it is. And that's what I know about it. And then I form my own view. And then I come back to you 2 days later and say, Kerissa, actually, that's the way I think it should be done. And so I had to reset my own understanding of what being quiet meant. Because being quiet for her didn't actually mean that she wasn't engaged. She wasn't feeling comfortable. She was all of that. But for her, she needed to just go and do a bit of research on the side, understand the situation a bit better, understand the lingo and the acronyms, and then come back. So whenever I've mentored people, I always say to them, what is the thing that's holding you back from putting yourself out there? And if it is that, then I said to her, what you can do in future is, because you're disengaging from the meeting, people feel like you're disengaging from the meeting. So what you can say in the meeting is, that's a really interesting point. I'm going to take it away. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to do a bit of research and I'm going to come back in 2 days. And then what you do in 2 days' time is you send an email to everyone that was in that meeting saying, guys, okay, I've had a look at this and this and this. And what you said is actually right, but think about it in this way. Because she would then come back and have the conversation with me. And I was seeing the value in what she was doing, but nobody else in that meeting was seeing the value in what she was doing. So she wasn't building her brand, but it was nothing to do with her feeling uncomfortable. So whenever I mentor women or men, whoever it is, I always ask them, what is the thing that is holding you back? And if it is part of your, your processing or how you work, around something, that's fine. Don't change it because it's good for you. But how do you make your presence felt? And how do you follow up on that presence? And how do you, be part of the conversation? And that's really important, because I think sometimes because of fear or feeling like we don't understand everything, we lean out of the conversation. And that causes people to overlook us. It causes people to, think, okay, well, she doesn't have anything to contribute. And that's not necessarily the case. So I really encourage women to say, okay, lead in. You don't understand it, but go find out and come back and share with everyone.
Okay, thanks, Kerissa, for that one. We just have a question in the chat, Kauthar. Do you maybe want to ask the question, or should I read it out?
No, sorry, I was busy driving. That's why I actually put it in the chat. But
right.
I'm home now. So I actually just wanted to ask the question of, so I currently have interns, and one of them is obviously a female, and she feels a little bit more intimidated compared to the rest of the interns and the rest of my male colleagues. So I'm kind of struggling to create an environment and to engage with her a little more, or encourage her to engage with us a little more, because of the fact that we're surrounded predominantly by males. And then obviously the second part of the question is, how do we continue, or I'm sorry, a little flustered getting into the house. How do we extend that to the rest of the industry to continuously make women feel a little bit more comfortable and allow them to engage with people irrespective of the environment that they're working in? I think this also kind of links in with the previous question, I suppose.
So, Kerissa, I would ask her what's making her feel uncomfortable. I mean, just being in a room of men, I mean, that shouldn't necessarily make you feel uncomfortable if they're all welcoming, if they, giving you space, if they're giving you airtime, if they're listening to your opinions. So that shouldn't and if they're drawing the opinions out of you, so that they're actually asking you for your opinion. So that shouldn't necessarily make her feel uncomfortable. But if it does, then that's the root cause, to try and address that. So I think you need to sort of pinpoint what's making her feel uncomfortable. And then based on what's making her feel uncomfortable, help her create strategies to deal with it. Like I spoke about the person that I had in my team who wasn't comfortable speaking in a meeting, and she was kind of like never seen. The strategy that we developed was then she will speak, she will say she needs the time, and then she will follow up with an email to everyone to make sure that her voice is heard. So I think building tailor, and it's not a one size fits all, because a problem is never the same. Every woman or every man actually has a different problem when they come into a room or a new corporate, and most people will know starting at a new company is terrible, because you have to prove yourself all over again, and you have to build relationships all over again. All of that's hard. So I think that whatever the problem area it is, I think making sure you really tailor the solution and the strategy, because sometimes people don't see, they see the problem, but they need a bit of guidance to actually figure out how they can work around it. How do they actually work through the challenge that they have, not necessarily changing their personality or changing who they are, but still showing up and still being vocal, or not vocal, but still being heard in the workplace. And that you could use different strategies to try and encourage. And the second thing I would say is, I think having someone that, pairing the person up with someone that could potentially be a buddy system for her. So, for example, if she's very nervous going into a technical meeting, someone that is very strong technically, that could be a buddy, or she's very nervous, speaking publicly, someone that really speaks well publicly, and sort of budding up with that person. I think it just could help from a mentorship perspective, to be able to support growth in whatever area she's feeling uncomfortable with.
Okay, great. I think I'll definitely try that. Shame. I think it's just because I know what it feels like, obviously, also coming in, and the first thing that, not all women might feel this way, but the first thing that I've always experienced is being in a more junior role, coming into a room where people have been in the industry for years, and you kind of just feel intimidated and almost like they have this prejudice already because of the fact that you're a female. You automatically don't know what you're talking about, or know what you're saying. It kind of just goes over their head. And I've kind of also read, there was this article on research as to why it's kind of funny why men don't usually listen to women, and it's almost the tone of their voice. It's like we have to say something like 2 or 3 times before it actually registers. It's kind of funny, and it all actually started with men not listening to their wives. But I mean, I kind of like see it. I have to continuously like repeat myself or explain the exact same thing in a different manner or using a different perspective. And it's quite challenging. And I think that's like adds to the intimidation. And you also don't want to come off as like aggressive. So yeah, it's rough.
Okay.
I think Kerissa, it's a good point. I think what I would just caution is sometimes we label things as male female when
Yes.
it may be something completely different. So it could be a man that is just so long-winded that everyone just switches off. Or it could be a woman that's so long-winded that everyone just switches off. So it may not necessarily be a gender thing. It may be something more that we just need to probe to understand, is my style of communication actually effective?
Yes.
And that could happen whether you're a man or a woman or whatever it is. So I think sometimes also just boxing it into gender, we close ourselves out to growth in other areas.
Yes, this is also why I actually mentioned it, because I wanted to find out a way, like, is it me? Should I be considering something else the way that I'm approaching it? Because to be honest, it's very difficult to be in a room filled with people who are a lot more experienced, and they have like this one minded way of doing things, and you're just trying to, I think, be a little bit more collaborative about strategies and projects. So I think I'm just like at that point where I'm moving into a management role where I have to kind of contribute to strategy. So I think that's a really great point to consider when obviously contributing to those types of conversations. Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you, Kothar. Okay, so we have Lineo, Natalie, and Fasik that have their hands up for some time. So maybe we're reaching the last 5 minutes. So if we can take all the questions, maybe, Kerissa, and then you can maybe just answer, and then, yeah, then it will be the top of the hour. So Fasik, Lineo, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I must say, Kerissa, it's always such a pleasure listening to you, and you inspire a lot of us. And thank you very much for paving the way for women like us. That you came before us, you made it possible for us to follow suit. So thank you very much for that. Kerissa, look, I mean, women want a seat on the table, right? And once they have the seat of the table, then they realize it's actually quite a hot seat, right? My question to you is, how do we, I've been obviously going through the news. It's public knowledge that CISOs are now being prosecuted on a personal level for security breaches. The CISO of Uber, for instance, or SolarWinds. So how do we then take back this message to the young leaders, aspiring cyber professionals, to actually join the industry and the profession while it's such a risky job, and now that you can actually be held liable on a personal capacity? So how do we close that gap and still inspire and motivate them to actually follow the cybersecurity route?
Great question.
Okay. Great question. Thanks, Lineo. So we'll just take Natalie's question quickly. Can we maybe stick to one question each, please? I'm just watching the time. Over to you, Natalie.
Hi, Natalie here. I just wanted to ask Kerissa, so when it comes to building your brand, right? So you have mentioned you've been in the industry for 20 years, right? I just want to ask, when it comes to building your brand, what is something that you have learned in 20 years and you are hoping that, it doesn't take the new generation, aka us, coming into the field 20 years to learn? What are some of the hurdles that you had to go through in 20 years, but you're hoping that a Natalie takes 5 years to learn? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Fasik? Oh, Vazika, sorry.
Fasika. Hi, everybody, and Kerissa. Not a question from my side, it's just a statement to say thanks for the timing of this talk was actually just perfect, because I actually have to do a talk similar tomorrow at work. So I'm actually just speaking from your pearls of wisdom and from everybody's questions in the room, etc. So it's obviously helping me a lot with what the questions that they would ask tomorrow, because they didn't even give us what they're going to ask. It's literally just going to be, you need to be inspirational to be able to obviously get people convinced to do cyber. And me having a daughter of 16 as well that told me, Mom, I'm not going to be an IT police, because that's what she calls it. She literally told me that. And then we got them, I think I took her for a bit of job shadowing, and I think I may have convinced her a little bit. We're still getting there. She's grade 11, so she has a very short time still to decide what she wants to study. So yeah, so just want to say thanks for good timing, actually great timing.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to try and tackle the two questions quickly. So personal liability. Yep, personal liability for CISOs are increasing significantly. It does make the role, the onus of the role a lot more complicated. A lot of big corporates are taking out personal liability cover, so they are insuring for that. So I think that is where the industry will go. I think big corporates will insure personal liability for their CISOs. But in saying that, I think personal liability exists in a number of different industries. So if you look at the medical industry, I would want my doctor to be personally liable when he's operating on me. When I'm having open heart surgery, I don't want a doctor that's going to go, well, actually, oops, I cut the wrong thing. Too bad. Like, I want that onus and that responsibility to sit with my doctor. And so I think the CISO's role is going there as well. That personal liability, and the job for us then becomes, how do we influence our organizations to make sure that that personal liability is covered by the actions that we're taking in our organization. So I think it is a new era for CISOs. I think it's a new dynamic. I think when we have conversations with people coming into cyber, we should use the personal liability as a mechanic to say that's how important this role is. Exactly like a doctor. The weight that you carry, it has to have personal liability because it's so critical. The systems that you protect are protecting our airlines. They're protecting our hospitals. They're protecting they're protecting everything that we do. And so that personal liability is really important because the job is important. And that's how I think we communicate personal liability to the next generation. And then building your own brand. Natalie, it's so nice to see you again. But I think the building your own brand, don't underestimate how your brand gets built. Every conversation, every person you meet, every single little bit of work that you do builds your brand. If you're going to be someone that builds their brand on social media only, it's not doing any of the hard work, going back to do the work. So the reason that I can come here today and talk about Mises 3 years later is because I've put in a lot of work. We started from 5 people. There were only 5 people trying to service thousands and thousands. And there was a ton of work that went into it. And so I can stand here 3 years later and go, wow, we've grown. But if I hadn't done any of the work, I wouldn't have been able to say that. So I think that it's really important that you do the work, make sure that every engagement you have, you're putting your best self forward, because you don't know who's going to once again open that door for you, sponsor you, build your brand when you're not even aware that they're doing it. That is so important. That network that you build, the community that you build around yourself.
Thank you, Kerissa. Wow, this was simply inspiring. I think we covered the challenges, but I think, just all that nuggets that you gave, I'm sure every person on this call, that you just made it worth it. Like with, sharing all your experience. So thank you very much. Grant also put some links and stuff in the chat. So please go there, follow Kerissa, follow ISC² Cape Town chapter. And thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Deidre. Thanks, Grant. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, Kerissa.
Thanks so much, ladies. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Cheers.